Congratulations. You've discovered another meta egg, and welcome to the place where we take the mundane and we find the esoteric and the occult and go, what is that doing there? We're basically a bunch of middle-aged people who go back and wonder how we were brainwashed when we were in the 80s and 90s. No, I'm kidding. Anyways, we go back and we look at some old cartoons from the 80s and 90s, and we discuss techniques on how individuals who were writing back then were writing their stories. Like, where were these ideas coming from? And to do that, we have my main man, Mr. Frank Zero.
Whoop, whoop.
Everyone has come to see. Guys, thank you so much for participating in Meta Egg up until this point. You guys have been great in the chat room. I see that there's already individuals out there saying, telling their jokes and saying that they'll be back to watch. Hopefully, these are easy to go back and watch after they're live. We're trying to kill two birds with one stone, but also, like, we're doing research for ourselves for future projects. Going out there and finding Frank Zero's page on the internet called
Saturday
Saturday Morning Vision Quest. You can also find his Patreon and supporting him there. Hopefully we will be making material so that you guys have plenty stuff up that you are not presented here. You know
So
what?
the Patreon is just the Frank Zero, and so far there, I'm just going to be writing larger guides to the episodes. So far I've just had one parallel with the David Wise episode we've just done, and that has an episode listing and much more illustration and things like that of every show, and then it'll slowly progress into something worthwhile to check per episode because it'll have lots of background data on the writers, and maybe questions you have that we don't get to in these, just trying to attack each show quickly and get out of it what we can.
Yeah, we're going real quick here. We're having about hour-long shows. You probably need a pencil and a piece of paper to write down some people that we just brush over. And there's a lot of stuff that we've discovered too. Like we were just talking, we were a little bit late because we were talking about things that we had discovered in other episodes that we like followed up on. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that a lot of that stuff will be, put up on Frank's page. So you guys need to go and support him because he's been a great sport. We're showing up on and being patient with me on these shows, and we've like accumulated a lot of material. But that being said, Frank promised new material this time. For one of the themes of this show was to have some new blood, as it were.
Yeah, I didn't want it to get boring, so I wanted to introduce as many new shows as we can. Hopefully, if anybody's been watching a number of these, they're sort of getting the themes that we keep coming back to. But and I also just wanted to say, have some confidence that if we cover a show on here, I did look into at least the first layer, where the story came from, who wrote it, and who translated it to the cartoons, who were the major writers on those cartoons, what other cartoons have they worked on, and stuff like that. Having said that, there's always more information that can be gathered. For instance, I haven't talked to many animators or artists who worked on these shows compared to how many writers I've been able to interview. Moving on.
Right now we're watching The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. I think circa 1996 is when it started. Went for at least 2 seasons. But Johnny Quest is like an old character, right?
So there was a much older show, I want to say it was in the 60s, and then there was a show in the mid 80s, and then they tried to resurrect it again in the 90s. Now, all of these shows have alien episodes, and I've already began poring over all 3 shows, alien parts, and other strange things, because Johnny Quest is a really interesting show. But the one in the 90s that we're looking at right now, from the episode Aliens in the White House, I think it is.
Alien in the White House.
Alien in the White House.
2, episode 10, I think.
Yeah, so they're trying to introduce a lot of these VR elements, and Johnny exists in 2 places on the Earth with all its mythic mysteries, and then also in this VR world where he's constantly fighting sort of an evil AI, or someone that's always been against Quest Corp or whatever organization that Johnny Quest and Bannon and so forth were in. Um, it's interesting that they all have alien episodes, but since this version of the show was so genuinely close to the X Files. It was one of maybe two
Right.
or three kid shows that dealt with alien elements that had actually genuinely come close to the X Files, and I guess the others would have been the Roswell show and Steven Spielberg's crack at the whole genre, Invasion America. We know
Right.
Spielberg done many live action versions of the alien relationship that we have. But the cartoons were allowed to get a little more detailed and a little stranger and a little closer to the testimony we get from abductees, military experts, and veterans, and contactees, and all that.
Do you think it
That
was
fancy
because of
nonsense.
X Files? Do you think that the success, because they're everything's right on top of each other? I feel like Bad, which we'll talk about as the third cartoon, The Real Adventures of Johnny, and X Files. I mean, when did X Files start? Was it like 94 or was it closer to 95, 96?
It was definitely closer to 94. It may have been even like 93 or something, but it's probably 94.
So that had to have an impact on everything, just like, Stranger Things has like opened the door for revitalizing
Precise.
Ghostbusters and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Precisely.
But it gave what the X Files really did that allowed these other writers to walk in the realm of was bring an air of government and military seriousness to the perspective of what's happening with extraterrestrials. So there were lots of shows and movies that were happy to play the card they were told to play. That is, if you involve yourself with a flying unidentified object or even the process of humans getting abducted, it will be funny. You will have stupid aliens in costumes, and everyone on set will be laughing by the end of it. The person at home will have no choice but to think this is only humorous content and it's related to something that's never happened in an alien experience, an anal probe. So all that media in the 90s, SNL and everything, even Kids in the Hall, sadly, gave up for the anal probe, joke, and we got no real analysis of abductions or who the aliens are or whatever until X-Files made it such a serious topic if you approached it the way the show did that you could no longer just make a joke out of it. And other writers would go, hey, I've been wanting to tell an alien story or maybe an alien experience that I had for 35 years, but I was in the military. I know how it goes. I know how the media reacts with the jokes and everything. So I'm not going to talk about that ever. And then you see this show that's hyper successful in the 90s. That's finally talking about these themes in some kind of serious air. And then suddenly the cartoons are affected. Other shows like Dark Skies are immediately competing with it. Um,
Oh
it was
yeah. I mean,
kind
it's
of amazing.
wild. Now that you've drawn my attention to Invasion America, we've looked at that. We've looked kind of peeked at Roswell a second and stuff. And like at that time period, riding that wave off of X Files, everything is like exposing the conspiracy theories of Area 51 and all of that. I mean,
Right.
it's in Independence Day 4, like
Yeah.
the mainstream. There's the video game. Remember the damn shooting game that was in every like
Area
quick pizza
51.
convenience store place
The
on the.
first every Area 51 game was a type of social engineering, in my opinion, but that was the first.
I mean, I could see it as conditioning easy. There's like even jokes and stuff like what's that? Paul, the movie with Seth Rogen and the gray alien, and he's like, "Oh, well, you've been conditioned to this is what I'm going to look like for the last 20 years." But I mean, okay, so what we're talking
50,
about is
the last half a
Whitley
century.
Strieber is pretty much the cultural shift, right?
Right.
That's like 86 is when his book comes out. 89 is when the movie comes out. Does
Yep.
explore anal probes, but it kind of hides it. And in fact, anal probes is what he was mostly like kind of made fun of for. That's why he's not taken serious, right? through
I'm
a
sorry,
large.
did he actually say that he was anal probed?
Oh, bro, he was raped. He says raped, and he's basically that expression of him giving the anal probe is what makes that like non kind of like serious. In my
Slapstick.
opinion, I mean, this is such
No,
a big topic, such a well-known story, such a huge cultural shift that there
yeah.
might be kind of just brushing over shit. But
Well, I think that when it comes to saying the word rape related to an abduction and saying the word anal probe related to abduction is two entirely different worlds. I
he
think
says
that
anal
people
probe, but he viewed it as rape. But he
many
also
people
had
are
sex. There's
raped, but that's because the MyLab. So the human on human rape experience, but you remember it as an alien on human rape experience, is from the sort of psychological torture and transformation that a MyLab does to someone. Why would aliens go for something that we find just sexually deviant if they're doing experiments consistently, always on reproduction?
because we do that on animals all the time to like if you view it almost as like an individual's livestock, then there's no like you're not like anally probing them just to snicker and laugh. That's the thing. This is a complicated situation. This is a complicated situation that is basically made to be almost brushed over because of the funny aspects of it.
Well, like in all of my years of just looking at people who have been abducted, their tales statistically just go into the fact that the highest percent of people are abducted by the 3.5 foot tall gray aliens. The next highest percent of people may be equally the blondes or the Nordics and the reptilians. When you get into MyLabs and reptilians as an opposite side of the diagram of people's experiences, reptilians and MyLabs always are some sort of sexual rape or the taking of sexual energy or something
Right.
like that. But usually
That's what
it's like,
I think
oh, when I
that's the key. That's the key right there is like sexual energy. If you view the whole anal probe thing as some sort of like harvesting for whatever, man, we'll throw in whatever like sci-fi theory you can think of. All we're kind of acknowledging is like we're thinking through this. We're leaving it on the table and we're kind of like viewing it. How would that narrative go about? What would they be doing? What would they be harvesting, so to
right.
speak? And
But
it's
I
not
feel that
necessarily like
it's been
an
established with reptilians and things like that that what they're actually harvesting is either like satanic ritual abuse, the energy of torture and trauma, and then sexual torture or trauma, or then murder. And then, that's what the elite or whatever are up to. And then you have this thing where people have millions of experiences of just laying in their bed and a reptilian comes in the room and rapes them. And then you have experiences with craft or grays that seem entirely automatic, machine like. They seem like a specific scientific
scientific
process. They
probe
treat people like
harvesting.
livestock because they have no feelings for them, and etc. But these all fit in specific different categories. Now, Strieber begins to I didn't know this about him, but I guess that would make sense. If he was the first whistleblower on the anal probe thing, and that's what the media got caught wind of and made funny for another few decades, then
We'll take a
then
look if
that's
you want to show what they do. Like they weren't able to show the anal probing during the movie that came out in the 80s because it was like it was such a new idea back then. They didn't want it to be seen as sexual deviancy. So if you watch the movie, what happens is like Christopher Walken strips down naked and sits down on their little lab table, and you have like the weird jello looking like gray aliens like kind of like going around the table and stuff. They almost look like the things that you see at like a car
car sales.
dealership.
Yeah.
And then the little squat little blue guys are like kind of like pulling a little anal probe out of a wall, and he sits down and they put it like on top of him, but that's what
Yeah.
it's supposed to symbolize. And in
See, the extraction of semen process is like that. You
Well,
would put it on top.
he definitely says they did that too, and they kind of like combined the two ideas because they didn't of like, you know, the Christian, because you're calling the damn movie Communion. You're talking about gray aliens, and immediately off the verbiage, you're associating it with Christian ideas and stuff, or like
Right.
one person in communion with gods, and you're saying that it's gray aliens, and then there's sex, and then he's like, he actually screws the gray alien in one point, and it's like a big confusing mess of like, first off, is Strieber, I mean, he obviously affected culture. Is he a plant? Was he meant to affect culture? Was he pushed to affect culture? Is he telling the truth? Is he CIA? I mean, he already has history that talks about secret schools and stuff of that nature. So there's a big mess. I don't worry about any of that shit. And because of that, some people say that I'm a bad researcher. No, I'm looking at what it did to the culture. Then you can go back, once you admit that it had an effect on the culture, then you can go back and look at the source. You get what I'm
Right.
saying? Because
Yeah.
Streaver might be completely demented. I have no fucking clue. You know what I'm saying? But if
The thing
we're
is,
talking,
what I've always gotten from him is that even on his personal show, when he interviews someone as ravishing as Peter Lavenda, he turns the entire experience into a snooze fest about his personal feelings and that one time when his wife saw a thing in a hotel and oh,
right,
he was just
poor
so
Anne,
enamored by the experience of and it's the sleepiest, most
he's a
useless if you're
showman. He's like a
right,
19, his whole idea of how to present this stuff is coming from where he grew up, which was the, you know, radio shows and stuff of that nature. Like, and he has that kind of showman. Well, people, what are the UFOs looking for? And it's
right.
kind of
Right. But I mean, I notice he takes even guests that would be interesting and very stimulating and makes them very boring because he starts with his own experiences or whatever. Now, that's not saying he works for an intelligence organization or anything, but he was a writer and a sci fi writer at that before he had this experience. And that doesn't debunk anything, but that's what the CIA does. They take someone who's good at something, they're up and coming, and they're not very well known. And they say, okay, now just kind of ferry some of this stuff over to your crowd and we'll pay you this amount or whatever because it's all about and they wouldn't even explain this to Whitley, but it's all about what you were talking about, just influencing the culture just as many degrees as they want it influence and not an inch more. And so like there are certain people who are allowed to go on with catastrophically bizarre ideas and they get lots and lots of attention and airtime and podcast and whatever because they're pushing something that's absolutely absurd and they'll push a lot of people out of just wondering about things about our past and about how the military might work in regards to aliens or whatever and just makes it this confusing mix of comedy and supposedly serious media that looks at the I think we're running out of a time when you could do that. I think we're running out of time when creativity could be pushed into something like the X-Files. They could make it to the mainstream, and even though there's intelligence apparatus within the people making the X-Files, you still get something genuine enough to, well, sort of the moral of the X-Files, turn someone into an obsessive character like Mulder, looking behind every shadow for some demon or beast of the past or some military revelation, and you just get a really sad, lonely person who has sort of pushed away everyone in their life that had like a real emotional connection because they're telling themselves they're after solving this childhood riddle, which the whole time was a military experiment set up to make a sci-fi writer-minded type of person pursue this thing so that he leaves behind a martyrdom of a career that thousands of people see it as only justified to follow in that path and try to get those same answers. And so is the X-Files giving us great ideas to investigate, or is it showing us quite directly as it moves from season to not being on the air back to season and comes back and it goes away, and every time we see a much sadder, lonelier Mulder, and we see a Scully more resentful to attach herself to this sort of work and this sort of
Defeated.
investigation.
Because the X-Files fails, right? There's like nothing really gets solved. Like,
Right. Because the government covers it back up or tells Mulder he's too far in, or someone who seems deeper at a deeper level of involvement tells him
man, you
to
were right.
back off
You are definitely
because
right on the betrayal of the government and Johnny, because holy crap, most of the characters are wearing like their best uniform. Most of them are in their whites and stuff. Like all of the like all of it takes place in a control room and stuff, and it's wild, bro. It's wild. Like they really had made this effort to like embrace the idea that the government covers up all through the 90s, and most kids shows have, come to think of it, it probably started with GI Joe, of course, but like after X-Files. Hey, here I want to talk about something else. I mean, the government aspect is cool, but also the idea of the whole VR thing, or the alien like
yeah,
communication through some sort of game or something like that, in a virtual world. And although the virtual world is like one of the main topics throughout the Johnny Quest
yeah,
series,
yeah, this version of it, surely. What's
I
not
mean,
in the other versions?
you might not have even seen it yet. Have you heard where do I still have that? Yeah, I still have this screen up. Have you heard of the third body problem?
Yeah, of course.
Body. Don't you think that there is some like similarities between this episode and that whole
Surely.
idea?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got this simulated world, and then you've got this alien telling you about other worlds, and that he's, found a way to just find a vessel on our world to accomplish a certain mission. The three body problem is about a lot. We'd have to have a show on that. But
Yeah, it's way layered. But the overall idea of, because there's even another show of, I think it was by the guy who did Johnny Mnemonic.
uh-huh.
And I think the series is on Amazon, and it's got that Chloe Mendez chick in it, but I can't remember the name of it. But instead of an alien race, it's this virtual reality game where the future, a different timeline from the future, is influencing the game, giving messages back in time. So the idea on the Johnny Quest is a very popular idea now. And I know that back in that time period is when you were having like that riff show. There was a lot of different shows that were based all around like the animation style, the 3D, really old school pre
CGI.
the prequels and Star Wars
Right.
animation style.
Right, right.
But also the
Uh,
idea of the Foo Fighters. There's definitely Foo Fighter like lore going on in this episode and stuff like that.
You've got this ship surfacing from a dimensional portal like the Philadelphia experiment. There's a lot of stuff that's like not spoken on, and it's sort
Yeah,
of sort of
brushed over.
occurring in hyper speed here. Now, this glaring weird rainbowy effect, this blurriness that we see over the animation, we're looking at that design, to me symbolizes the Philadelphia experiment, like scalar waves or whatever the hell,
Oh yeah,
transmutating something from one place to another with a specific technology. And they said that the
that's a good
whole
point. That happens a lot. Like the whole, I kind of took it off a little bit, but the whole last part of the series, I was like, they're totally relying on that whole whatever that effect that they use there.
yeah
Like,
yeah and the sort
well,
of
yeah,
the orb of light that winds up being the consciousness of the alien or whatever. Obviously, that's a huge part of ufology and paranormal
yeah.
experiences, and
The
then the alignment of the
UFO has
UFOs.
soul.
Yeah, it looks like a star system or something. The way that the UFOs were aligned, it's some intelligence to the gathering of those objects.
All right, now I'm going to move on to Mighty Max because we're already almost at a half an hour, and bro, Mighty Max is a lot to talk about.
Yeah, sure thing.
So, Mighty Max was actually spawned off from Polly Pocket. And from what I've learned, there was no real basic storyline to what he was. Does that make sense? Like he wasn't, it was like licensed to the cartoon, and the cartoon had to devise its own story, so to speak.
Yeah, well, it was basically just we have to make a male Polly Pocket because Polly Pocket's doing far too well. And then they were just like, okay, here's the design of the male toys, go to it. And so the toys got, I thought, more and more popular before the show even started. And at like max popularity, max, that's when the show came out.
Right here. Here's where it talks about it. So Mighty Max is the animated action horror, and there is some horror aspects of it, dude. I think
Sure.
one of the things that it was talked bad about it was its violence, because it is bombs going off. G.I. Joe never showed anybody die. It showed laser blasts and explosions, and people did die, but there were skeletons and stuff like that. But Mighty Max has like people dying left and right. It's
But if you
wild.
think about it, it's really Norm fighting his way through a boy adventure of action, and then the rest of the show. So they have like one dude who they're like, okay, it's going to be another violent situation. You're the fighter, do this. It's not like all the characters are in torturous peril in fights, or, it's silly.
Only the small
Besides
child.
Norm. What's that?
Only the small child is in peril.
Right, right. Well, the small child is in cosmic peril, and the little
Right.
Yoda, all who's a
Owl,
Lemurian,
dude.
the last living
Sumerian.
Lemurian,
Sumerian fowl is what he
is
calls himself.
his yeah, and he gives him the intelligence and the knowledge to chase after this cosmic conflict. And then Norm is just the muscle. It's really clear and direct. It's just like, Norm,
Yeah.
go take care of the snowmen. Norm, go take care of the lava monsters,
Although
And then
Norm's
we'll
identity is kind of, I found out that he's considered basically every hero. Like,
he's a universal soldier, Cobra Commander, genetic dream. He's the universal soldier. I don't have another. He's the Highlander. I don't have another way to say.
right. They call him Sir Lancelot. They call him Thor. They call him Samson. They call him Hercules, and as if
Yeah.
he was all those people at different points in history.
Exactly. Right.
But I mean,
All the
that's
more
just a
appropriate
really
to care.
warpy. It's a really warpy thing to come off of Polly Pocket, bro. Like straight
It's
weird.
it's warpy, but think how that G.I. Joe was just like into season 1 when they decided that they should not only create Serpentor, but he should be created from the genetic, greats of the past, like Genghis Khan and all
Right.
these things. It's like, who talked to who while they were making those shows and said, hey, let's kind of spread your idea of this show too? Or were these shows given show Bibles that already had these mystic concepts, maybe just thought up by a comic book artist, but we haven't heard of it before, this process?
Well, Mighty Max is supposed to be the brainchild of Mark Zaslav,
Yeah.
and he looks to have been involved with a whole shit ton of stuff. But basically, he's labeled as the head writer for Mighty Max, and I guess probably some other stuff. But again, there's Defenders right there. The dude
Yep.
was part of it. The
Yep.
New Adventures of Johnny Quest, which are not the real adventures, but
That's
that was the
86.
86 version.
And we
Right.
already know they have alien episodes. Oh, that's what I wanted to say before.
DuckTales.
We know in the first rendition of Johnny Quest, we have reptilians and aliens. We know in the second rendition in the 80s that we at least have aliens. And then we know in the one we've just discussed, we have multiple episodes about the Anasazi and aliens in Washington, etc. Please, as you were, this list of this man. I don't remember if I looked him up or not.
No, I don't. Well, I mean, we didn't make a profile of him or anything. I just thought he might be interesting because, like,
Sure.
the Mighty Max basically seems to be his baby. Like, he threw
Yeah.
what he wanted to in there. And there is, so I'm going to just read this right off of Wikipedia. The series follows Max, an adventurous teenage boy who receives in the mail a small statue of a fowl inscribed with Egyptian hieroglyphics, whereof the translation states, "You have been chosen to be the cap bearer. Go to the mini mart and wait for a sign. Mighty Max." Shocked by the message, Max drops the statue, shattering it and revealing a red baseball cap and embolized with a yellow M, which he dons. The cap is capable of projecting wormhole-like portals. Like, It reminds me of a tinfoil hat, dude. And which he can teleport across time and space, or space and time. At least there's one event where he time travels. Most of it is through space.
Well, traditionally, that sort of wording about a cap or a hat in much older writing can be related to a magician or a certain type of scientist, or
Sure. I also kind of
I'm just
thought Montauk crossed my head. Like, he's
sure.
basically a Montauk boy, right? He's a
Yeah,
Montauk.
well, I mean, the symbol on his head looks like his whole world is actually a sad delusion. And he just works at McDonald's. But the symbol with the
Well, that
M,
happened. I mean,
masonry, and Montauk, there's got to be something at work there with the magic cap and all this in ancient literature.
okay, let's talk about this particular episode, again, having to do with aliens and negotiating the fact that we can cover up that the aliens even happen.
Yeah.
Because that's what Johnny Quest does. Johnny Quest is like, the vice president was an alien, guys. Our
Let's keep
bad
to
for not
ourselves.
telling you. We won't tell you. This
Right.
one on the nose with serious trouble. It's about the Dogon tribe. They mention the Dogon tribe and the fact that the connection between humans and aliens is with the Dogon. But we got to watch more of these, because the way he communicates with the fowl is like he opens the comic book and like the page is different. Like, he'll get signs in the world around him that make him seem like he's psychotic, like you said. And then
it's a very
he jumps through a
Matrix
portal in the middle of Burger King, and everybody just goes about their day like it never happened. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's this very Matrix-like stigma. Like, you get the idea that time is patched up around him, and maybe there's even agents of time who make sure that things, we never see them, but maybe agents of time that make sure there's no holes for normal citizens to notice or whatever. But yeah, the giant M on the shirt and on the hat tells us either magic, masonry, or something like that.
Again, we see them messing around with, like, the Dogon tribe guy picks up a submarine just like they did in Johnny Quest, but
He's also got
somehow
the
this
M
guy,
on his chest. I'm sorry to interrupt you, bud.
he's got an owl in his chest, is what you said?
No, he's got the M, buddy. The M that Mighty
Oh, the
Max has.
M. Oh, yeah, okay.
Also on his brow, I believe.
Yeah, it makes that. But basically, he does this weird ritual and gains powers to be like a superhero. Like, he even changes his look based upon the power of the Sirius star. Like,
Yeah.
the star gives him his power. Like, it beams down, and
Or
this dude,
possesses him, any number of things.
yeah, it's wild. And then they go up against him, and he basically beats the crap out of them. And so they go to Dogon, because the smart owl, foul, Lemurian, weird creature tells everybody he's not a chicken, takes him by logic and process of elimination, figures out that they need to take a portal to the Dogon tribe. This has to do with Sirius. Let's go talk to the now.
There's also this weird moment. I don't know if you caught it, but there's this weird moment where I was just noting how the show is great for sync because of all the portals. And then my next note is that an invisible wall stops them from reaching the pyramid home of the Nomo. And I forgot exactly how they home of the Dogon, of course. I forgot exactly how they deal with that, but the next thing I'm noting is about the
they don't deal with it. They can't really, like, they're picked up by the Dogon tribe because they can't get to the pyramid, and then the ship shows up.
Right.
And then he's like on a cross. They basically put him on a cross. And this guy is like, the aliens come out, and then he uses the
bird
thing on his back to beat them out of the way. And then they hop into a portal, and then the guy deduces that this is going to be one of the places they hit. So then they try to get there first. And this is where it gets real because they're just like, I mean, I cut it out, but they're like blowing people up, bro. They're just like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of bang, bang, boom, boom going on.
And this is a
Like,
nuclear facility, if I remember
yes,
correctly? Yeah.
yes. He figures out that they're going for nuclear facilities and that
Like aliens tend to, like UFOs tend to historically, statistically, however you want to look at it.
or have in the past, yes, there has been stuff sighted above both nuclear launch sites and nuclear facilities. In fact, where they've like turned stuff off and things of that nature. But the thing is these particular, not necessarily dog-looking creatures from Sirius, want the toxic waste, which is like their goal. Really weird idea. And so
Right.
they make this deal. They basically say, hey, we'll give it to you if you'll take it away. And both of them are laughing when they're making a deal. Like they did,
Right.
like,
It's weird.
oh, we're getting the good side of the deal. But
Right.
and then at the end, they have, I guess Mighty Max had a tendency to teach stuff like the magic school bus. So
Yeah,
they
the
talk
moment
about the
of
real
this is
aspect
why
of
they need
like,
psychologists, supposedly, to make this 5 minutes of like, hey guys, listen to your parents.
right,
Go to
yeah.
church.
The more you know, like
Right.
G.I. Joe.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's okay. It's weird because the Dogon tribe is a source of conspiracy theory. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is like
Sure.
considered to be fringe land. And they're
But it's the
basically
same as the Egyptian connection to Sirius and Orion and everything like that. It's the same as all of the every ancient tribe or group that had a direct connection to what seems to be transdimensional or extraterrestrial beings, particularly those that show them flying in the air with craft that humans didn't seem to have at the time, and those who brought an immense amount of knowledge and agriculture and language and spirituality and mythology and everything to a single group at a distinct point in history.
I also told you that I wanted to talk to you about the whole like Saturn connection here.
Yeah.
It's real because it only happens for a frame, so it's kind of hard to find. But there's a scene on the temple where they have like, you can see there's a big planetary thing right here. There's another planet here. There's a star there. And then there's Saturn. And that goes back to the legend of the Dogon having a star map of the solar system that's accurate, including
Yeah.
where the things are placed, how big they are, and rings around Saturn. Now, you've made a good point about this, though. Why Saturn is like kind of symbol of space, on kid
Well, I
toys and
mean, we
shit.
have this black cube. This is one of the major elements of sync. Is this black cube that we have in Transformers, we have in Hellraiser, we have in Star Trek, and it repeats over and over. And this black cube in space that has something to do with like assimilating us or turning us to machines or a technology that's going to overwhelm or our organic processes or whatever that is. And also the Saturn cube with relation to media and the Sega Saturn and the years and years they've been using advertising with the black cube and the one eye and the whatever to harken back to this cult of Saturn that seems to actually control things in Hollywood, or at least are obsessed with the symbolism enough to make it seem like that's one of their leading ideas, is this idea of the Kaaba at Mecca or the Transformers cube or however you view it, and what that means in our history and in our future, what it has to do with extraterrestrials. And I think we're also just nodding to a Saturn cult that tends to be of the controllers, of the highest of the secret societies, of perhaps just the people who choose our images and our movies and our culture, who pick out those things that will be paramount to our attention span, regardless of whether it's at the Super Bowl or whether it's walking to the bank or whether it's getting a drive through McDonald's. They want everyone to have this imagery funneled through their psyche at some point, sometimes for 5 to 12 years. All the movies, all the albums, everything is the black cube.
Hmm.
It seems singularly obsessed when you see a collection of them, but spread throughout Michael Jackson's career and Sega's career and whatever. It just seems like a random thing that just some people know about, or whatever, random nod to some sacred idea, which it is.
I think that my big sink in this is that they put the Saturn right here at the very beginning at the title card where it says Serious Trouble. You see a light like a UFO, and you kind of think that that's a UFO, but it's really Saturn. Like it's really like a throwback to that Dogon's knowledge of the rings around Saturn. But the way that it's subliminal is creepy. And the first thing that I thought of was like dark cube.
Yeah.
Black cube.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it will give us superhuman powers and dog ears.
If invoked properly. Invocation or UFO visit, whatever your mind lens tells you happened in that experience.
I would mention Nick Hinton, Nicholas Hinton. I mean, this guy's been mentioned on Joe Rogan and stuff by Douglas Trussell, but he is what I would consider to be a sinkhead. He's kind of gotten very Christian in the last couple of years, which is fine with me.
Did you mind Duncan? I mean, did you just say Duncan Trussell, or is there another Trussell that?
Is that his name? Duncan Trussell? Is that his name?
Duncan Trussell is the psychedelic homie that's Joe Rogan's friend.
This guy's into conspiracy theories, and I'm pretty sure he was the one who mentioned Hinton. But Hinton wrote the Saturn Time Cube, which is about like it does mention synchronicities and stuff like of that nature and symbolism, and that's the type of stuff. He's Nick Hinton is a sinkhead. I don't know if he would want to be called that, but he knows who they are. He knows who the sinkheads are.
Okay.
But his book, he's got a very popular book about Saturn Time Cube, and there's multiple podcasts about that whole idea if people want to go investigate. I think that he's actually on Duncan Trussell's Family Hour for at least one episode.
Cool.
But yeah, I don't know. People are, let's see here. Now we're talking about the Bureau of
Alien Detectors, which is such a strange thing to name anything.
I think that it was toted, as this is how Wikipedia put it. It was basically the idea was X-Files meets A-Team.
Yeah. And yeah, mostly.
So they had people who were
the most interesting aspect of this is that they have a bunch of, X-Men or A-Team like assembled personalities that can deal with and pick up and related to the paranormal. And then one of the characters who's actually the military veteran is a repeated abductee. And I think as we go through more episodes, this will become very interesting because this is the first time I know of that we're giving a cartoon audience a repeated look at an abductee's life and how they deal with memories and
you're talking about Moose, huh? Because this storyline had this whole thing
name.
where, huh?
I was just saying, yes, he has the most bizarre name.
Moose, and I think that the last name is either Polynesian or something. It almost sounds like a football player. But I called him Moose, but basically he was abducted. He's the one who has like a mohawk. He's bigger, but the aliens, it's expressed in the episode that the aliens had abducted to him. They changed his DNA to where he can like morph into certain things.
Gave him his powers.
Uses that to keep other people from being traumatized.
Right.
But we're not talking about one species of aliens. We're talking about basically multiple different people with different agendas and so forth.
Are you saying that he was abducted by multiple parties, or are you just saying those parties exist?
I'm saying that he is basically anti-abduction, right?
Right.
But every alien that he comes across is not the aliens who abducted him. So one of the main issues in this episode is that he's got to negotiate with those aliens and try to see, like, at first he's just like Hulk smash, or
Right.
it's clobbering time, and he
Sure.
basically has to be more. The episode kind of, you know more about him than I do, but it did pay
Okay.
attention to him from that aspect of, that's why he's here, is because he's gotta curb his hatred for all aliens, because they're not all the ones who abducted him.
Yeah, but that's a lot of bizarre stuff for a cartoon to deal with. Even to tell
For real.
little kids like, hey, you could be abducted by some aliens you never remember, but then you could
Right.
also run into 8 alien species and never get any how do you say when you
Like,
have
not all pedophiles
closure.
are
You never get any closure as to
pedophiles.
what happened to you as a child or something. That's the most bothersome. But just that whole aspect of who he is in this show, like, yeah, he's the veteran and he knows how to kick butt, but also they just want him because he's like traumatized from an abduction. How does this work?
Right, it's weird, man. It's weird because it's like, hey, not all aliens, anal probe.
Yeah.
What
It's this
happens to
weird
it?
Stephen
Matter.
Greer opinion. Like everyone that has dealt with aliens forever and investigated them, all have come to this conclusion. There's some that don't want to hurt us. There's some that like seem to love us and want to save the planet. There's some that are so robotic and horrifying that it'll change your life to have one interaction with them. And there's a spectrum. And then Stephen Greer has always just been like, they're all good. The bad ones are made up. Shut up. I know everything. I have a document that says one time I was in the White House that says that all of them are nice. So I know better. Don't listen to anyone. When I was given the White House briefing about the ones that they don't like, I realized that some of the corporations there had invented the ones that they don't like. So they're all actually real nice. I was a doctor. I was an ER doctor. And that means intense stuff. But I'm an
They're
expert
all
on
nice. They're nice aliens. Those aliens are so nice.
I don't want to knock Greer. I hated his genes. The genes were too high for so many years, but I think he finally figured that out, and I hope he feels better.
I don't know, man. It's just a weird messaging. It's weird messaging, bro, because
Yeah,
like, even though these are nice aliens, like, the little kid, like, is seen crying multiple times in the show because he's having to like depossess his mom from this alien or whatever.
right.
And
This
like,
is
with whites, it's weird, bro. Like, it's mind control weirdness. And
So this kid is looking everywhere for someone to confirm that he's not just a crazy kid. There are
right,
aliens possessing people everywhere. And every person he comes across, he calls the cops and they're like, we'll be right there. But we already know the cops are aliens who have possessed people. So it's really like horrifying to see it from his perspective because his mom comes home and she spends like a day and a half with him and then shows symptoms of not really being his mom. And then he's like, oh
right.
no. And meanwhile, there's huge abductions going on in the barn, 20 feet outside
Yeah,
the house at the
mutation.
pitch of night, middle of the night. So there's a lot going on here for that poor kid.
For the poor
Uh,
kid, the kid is traumatized, and like, there's that
yeah,
one scene where they even the bad members, that's what they're called, the Bureau of Alien Detection, basically
right,
equals bad, and they're
sure.
like, "Wait, is that the dude's mom shooting at us?" And it's
Yeah,
like, the alien abducted the mom, tried to go to war with humans, and then afterwards they're just like, "Hey, their ship's coming. We'll let them have a pass on this one."
yeah, we'll let him figure it out. It's like, that kid's the only human smart enough to not be possessed by the thing, and you're making him fight his mom who has a firearm and is possessed by the thing. I don't know. It's extreme.
It's a
Bad
lot.
got real extreme.
I like it though. I would like to watch more of this just because, I don't know, the whole aspect of it is not to be taken serious. I like what was that other show that we watched, was
Okay,
Invasion of
Eric and
Roswell with,
Julia Lewald, we want to focus in on them. Anyway, Invasion America by Steven Spielberg. I think that's what you're asking.
isn't that the one that had, like, it was a very similar, like, their base was in like Roswell Desert or some shit like that, in a
Yeah.
very similar, like, bunkered out, high tech stronghold.
So Invasion America, as well as the Roswell show, as well
Yeah.
as this show puts them in kind of a desert, whatever. But the one thing we didn't mention when we were going through these shows that so highly connect to the actual UFO material, Ninja Turtles, when all those shows were done what they were doing with the alien premise or they had been canceled or whatever, in the early 2000s, there's multiple seasons of Ninja Turtles in a row with not only Men in Black characters, but an underground gray alien military facility where they make hybrid, like computerized grays for the government. And there's also the show Ben 10. It gets so deep into this stuff that they have characters referred to as plumbers who are like the real Twilight boys, the real old veteran guys who first came out talking about alien projects and alien contact. Robert Dean and his sort of circle. Uh, I forgot where I was in there. Oh yeah, but they had this information that basically the Ninja Turtles version of all that had a desert-based kind of Roswell. They even had a version of this they told in black and white. They would show like in the 50s, the aliens are running away, the military grabs them, and that's what evolved into this Men in Black slash underground hybrid program. But most of them also portray these beings as being underground. So it gets into the whole Dulce narrative. And it really is a fine helping of all the 90s conspiracy stuff, kind of
Right.
in cartoon form, you know? Even Steven Spielberg was doing that exact same thing
Facing off
using
of
a
it.
prototype of a NASA shuttle that wouldn't be used in real life for another 25 years. What were you saying, bud?
No. It was like mainstream at that time where conspiracy theories were just like drenched on
Right.
Saturday morning cartoon. Like
Yeah.
the whole Roswell thing, the whole Area 51 thing, the whole like secret base with alien autopsy thing, the government knowing that we've had contact with multiple species, like all of that was every cartoon.
Yeah.
And it's just bizarre. Like I
But
think we
even
take it
when
for
the
granted now.
obsession was over, when the real obsession with that material, the X-Files and all that died down, the fact that Ben 10 and Ninja Turtles kind of
Right.
carried it without being noticed. They weren't at all thought of as anything but little kid shows. But yet
Ben 10
they
was a big one. I've often thought about sooner or later we're gonna have to cross. Oh no, we're getting close to the time where you're gonna have to tell me like, what are we doing next, bro? Where are we going next? Are we
oh
going to see some Ben 10s and shit like that come up in here?
very possibly one person requested anime, and all we've given them so far is Ulysses 31. But I was thinking, there's just a lot more Johnny Quest weirdness we could get into, but we could also pull something like Cthulhu or Stonehenge or something totally out of right base. If you guys would like to vote in any manner, and just there's more people that want a certain topic than there are others, we'll put that into consideration. We're basically doing it at a rate where the story makes sense to us as we meet these humans related to James Bond Jr. I think I did an episode scan of everything that was available with James Bond Jr. And as eager as I was, I either found none or I found one episode. But I will work that in there if there was that one. I
I
honestly
like
can't
the
tell you.
Cthulhu. It's actually pronounced Cthulhu, according to
Oh,
the author,
I'm
but
sorry.
everybody knows it as Cthulhu. No, I got corrected by a scholar one time, and then I looked it up, and it's true. It's called Cthulhu, but even in cartoons and stuff, because I mean, you got like what was that one where Billy and Mandy, The Adventures of Billy and Mandy, where they're walking around with the Grim Reaper and shit.
Right.
Uh, there's like there's like whole episodes that are talking about like Cthulhu making phone calls and stuff. And it's weird because like that's another thing that we kind of take like the Necronomicon, which came from the same thing. It's like things that cross over into all kinds of media.
Yeah.
Like that it's
Yeah.
almost like an accepted idea, and it really wasn't before then.
I think Peter Lavenda was responsible for that Necronomicon that we all have on our shelves.
Mm. It's just you get the Evil Dead, you get the crossover and Marvel with the Darkhold, but from my understanding, it was basically an idea that H.P. Lovecraft like invented. that's been kind of accepted as truth in series such as like the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shaw, which
But
kind of popularized it.
weird connections, like when he was writing about Crowley doing a ritual in Louisiana to summon some ancient gods, Crowley actually was here doing that. And
Yeah.
when he talks about these ancient Babylonian whatever texts, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of Ben Carson and trying to match sort of his sources to my ancient text sources and trying to wrap my head around all this stuff. And so far, there's no. I'm sorry. How do you pronounce it? Say that again. Cthulhu.
Who?
Cthulhu. What?
Cthulhu. It's like we
Cthulhu.
had this whole discussion. It's kind of like
You're
the
telling me
TH
that
Cthulhu.
creature is actually supposed to be named Cthulhu?
Yeah. Well, I bet you I
believe
can
you.
find it.
It's just the
No.
Cthulhu
I
thing was so much
want to
more
make
cryptic.
sure that I'm right though, because it's something that nobody really talks about. Like even if you say that, people will look at you weird.
Yeah,
But like,
and I'm trying not to look at you weird. I'm just trying to understand what it actually is.
yeah, because we were at a sync summit one time and we were talking about like it's the TH, it's like it makes an L, and then that's how like H.P. Lovecraft was like trying to invent languages and stuff.
Right.
I
But
mean, like
Cthulhu
I
sounds like a
think,
Dr. Seuss world. I mean,
yeah, Cthulhu. Like I mean, I think most of what H.P. Lovecraft was doing was kind of putting real stuff. And I mean, the guy was racist. I'm not like a big fan, but he was putting real ideas of historical events and mixing them with like total bullshit and fantasy. But
and real
that
magic
is
with
what we're
bullshit,
talking about.
made up
Huh?
magic. I'm sorry, man.
No,
And real magic and also bullshit magic in language,
see it?
all thrown into a cup.
Look,
Pronounced.
this is the Cthulhu. KL. See how it Cthulhu. This is the pronunciation given by Lovecraft in his correspondence, as mentioned in his selected letters by Arkham
Is that
House in 1926.
Clorhu? Would that be more
It's
like Clorhu?
Cthulhu. There's no R. It's like cool.
Oh, I was mistaking that I with that other thing as an R. I totally saw a different letter. Okay,
Oh yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, you're on the small
totally
screen too. It says KHL, and the U has like a point to the top, but I don't even know what the pronunciation is. And then it has another L with like apostrophe. But
yeah.
this is how Cthulhu is how people normally pronounce it.
Yeah.
But this is also suggested by Lovecraft, but not how and Cthulhu is a simplified way of pronounce Cthulhu, often used in pop culture. Cthulhu.
Word.
It's just it's wild because we were like, it was weird when we were at the Sync Summit when we were first talking about this. Then all of these clue like syncs started happening where people were like, we have a Mr. Green and a Mr. White would walk up, or something would pass by on a car that said Mrs. White. And it was like all of these references to Clue and trying to figure out a mystery, put it together, but anyways, my point was that like Lovecraft influenced all of these ideas of secret societies and hidden subterranean civilizations and magic and all of that influences even like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles being in the sewers and stuff, as if there is like some sort of hidden, kingdom that no one knew was even there, or some sort of like that's what we're talking about. That's as bad. That's Roswell. That's all of these ideas.
It's Antarctica.
Yeah, because Antarctica was one of his stories. Like he used the bird expedition as sort of like this vehicle to give, and that's like real popular now with like the whole flat earth ice wall ideas and all of that. He did that way back in like the 30s. And then individuals like Robert Anton Wilson did the same thing, where they're like the whole Illuminatus trilogy is taking even people like John Dillinger and stuff like that and mixing them into this like fantasized world where there's operatives and spies and they're controlling the course of like the
Like
JFK
Invisible.
assassinations. It's crazy.
Yeah, like Invisibles and a lot of other works that it's just
Also-
like super well-read people forcing a conspiracy out of the things that could relate historically. It's interesting, but I feel like there's enough to investigate that we don't need half bullshit worlds with real history that no one's looked into yet. We should just have looking into
the
that
real
history.
world works well enough.
But yeah, but this is how we communicate in concepts, you know, that black cube that's shot into our face by any given advertiser is how we can become interested in seeing a pattern and then learning the ancient or the worthwhile history of something. So, you know, something about art.
I think Cthulhu. I think that we should go Cthulhu. I think we should try to like, because like I said, I mean, there's like he's like a character in some friggin' series. So
yeah,
yeah,
we already have we already have at least a few Cthulhu's already together, but wait, sorry.
Yeah, you sent me quite a few.
Okay, cool.
Now we have to do the YouTube thing, bro. We're at an hour. We did 2 shows this week, although we didn't do one last week. We'll hop on the Cthulhu thing here soon. I can't even say it. I'm so mixed up on it.
So, what is hopping on the YouTube thing? Does that mean I get to go, hey, click like and subscribe and you enjoy it, and then join the channel if you don't realize that you like it and didn't click yet, and we're doing, and it's a great show. That was my Biden version.
Go back and watch all the other shows.
Please subscribe. Hey kids, it's America. Hey, this is America, man.
We have secret alien bases.
Hey man, that's just, come on, man.
Just like, bro, it's a good show. It's a good show.
Another 4 years is like, I got Putin I got Vladimir Putin in a headlock. You guys don't even know it, man. You're gonna elect me. I'll tell Russia, hey man, the UN has the right to sleep in your bed, man. Yeah, it's America, man. Come on. All right, I'm done.
You
I'm
have
sorry.
the morals of an alley cat.
Hey man, come on.
Come on, man.
I'm sorry for everybody who just had to sit through that. Still looking for the Cthulhu.
Everyone who had to deal with Frank's impersonation of Joe Biden. Please, I hope that doesn't affect the algorithm.
Man, come on. Come on, man.
Come on, man. Come on, just hit like and subscribe, man. And then we'll put a little meta egg in your pillow.
I mean, this guy's running around with crazy thoughts, man. Come on.
Thanks, Frank. We'll talk to you guys soon.